Happy Atlas Telecast Tuesday. It's Dan, and I'm joined today by Cassius King from the Cinema Junkies.
Thanks,
Welcome,
Dan.
Cassius. How you doing?
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
My pleasure. I hope everyone out there in the chat and in the audience is doing great today. We have fantastic technical production once again from the legendary B. We've got Justin on the computer helping take questions from the chat and relay them. We also have your favorite, audience selected favorite, Brendan, also in the chat to help us get questions from the audience, relay them to us, and then help the conversation stay flowing.
Love it.
We got Hajin keeping it real over there on the decks. We've got Devontae, and it's another beautiful Tuesday here in sunny downtown Glendale, right on the Burbank border.
Nice.
Right by IKEA.
Yeah.
How often do you go to the IKEA?
Not too often. Not gonna lie.
It's one of those things that like you go in there and you get lost,
Yeah.
and then you're like, I am not coming back here for a while.
I'll go to Home Depot.
Home Depot is the spot.
fine. Yeah.
How about Lowe's?
Lowe's, I typically don't end up in Lowe's.
Lowe's, low
for some
cost
reason.
leader.
Yeah.
Depends on where you're at, because there's not that many Lowe's compared to Home Depot. Home Depot's got a pretty solid lock.
Yeah. I
On
mean,
the supplies.
If Lowe's is listening, I'll take a brand deal from them.
Speaking of which, shout out New Balance and iDress for these fresh kicks that I'm wearing today.
I seen them.
Love these. Also shout out Frankie Villani, who helped design them with iDress. So, got to stay fresh to the nines here.
Are those 101s or?
These are 417s.
So there's 417 pairs? Or?
Oh, that's a good question. I
wonder
don't
if that's
know.
the shoe number.
Valid. Yeah, I think the New Balance is like a 3-number code. New Balance alphanumeric.
Oh,
I
that's
think
right.
they
That's
call
right.
it.
That's
Yeah.
like their shoe. Yeah.
So, thanks for joining us. I have been a fan of what you've been doing with Cinema Junkies and with Rosie, your
Yeah.
beautiful, esteemed robot here, for a while now. But tell us, how did you get interested in filmmaking? Tell us a little bit about your journey. What first got you inspired to start making films and get involved in this world?
Yeah, in a nutshell, I would say I started making films with friends, recording house parties, drunken nights, and stuff like that. And it's it wasn't my camera, it was my friend's camera. And I'll never forget the feeling I had from seeing the playback and watching all my friends just have this emotional attachment to that night or whatever it was. And that's kind of the root of it. And it's progressed into doing music videos for friends. And then I got hit up from local artists to shoot their videos. And then at that point, there was an inflection for me to be maybe I could turn this into a business, or maybe it doesn't have to be just a hobby. And so I think 2015, I took it real serious and worked every weekend, two days every weekend. So working with multiple artists throughout the whole year, and kind of seeing that and going through that journey made me realize I could turn this into a business.
So that phrase that I hear the kids say, "That night was a movie," that comes from you, doesn't it?
Yeah.
When it's just been such a crazy night that literally it's a cinematic adventure.
I mean,
basically.
Movies like Project X, Project X, stuff like that. That was definitely our high school days.
Nice.
So
I grew up skateboarding, and so we would make skate movies, and then we'd also do these sort of our version of a superhero movie where we're just goofing.
Yeah.
And so I can totally relate to those, those home video days where you're just you have a prosumer or consumer camcorder and you're running around and you're just trying to tell a story. Maybe you don't even have an editing system.
You're just capturing.
You're just editing in camera, or you're doing a crash edit from a VCR to another VCR. I remember doing that a lot in high school. So yeah, that's really fun. What would you say some of your main inspirations were outside? I love that you kind of just got into it, living it, right? And capturing the lifestyle that you were living with your friends.
Yeah.
Are there any sort of movies or music videos from your youth that kind of stand out to you and as inspiration?
Yeah, I would say, I've always been a fan of movies, and even music videos from like the Hype Williams days. Those,
Legendary.
Legendary. Really good cinematography back in the day. I mean, even now, it's evolved, but
Definitely that's some standout work with ultra wide angle lenses,
Yeah.
very close to the performer.
Yep.
I love going close with a wide angle lens, and that's like something they do a lot in skateboarding too, where you're following the action and it looks larger than life. It really
Yeah.
fills the whole field of view. And I mean, Hype was doing a lot of that on film, so it's amazing to see. You look back to those like late 90s, early 2000s videos, and the contrast, the color, the lighting. It's really standout stuff that still holds up today when you go back and watch it. But it's interesting to see how like lighting styles have changed too.
yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
definitely contrast is lower, I would say, in more modern cinematography. Like people have kind of built a wider dynamic range with like lower contrast
Yeah.
in the scene.
Well, I think you think that's because the technology has allowed them to do that, play in that level.
I think it might be that they're trying to evoke what they think film looked like, but then if you go back and look at that old stuff, they would build contrast into the lighting. So like film by nature has a very wide dynamic range, and so out of the processing it might look flatter until you get to the telecine, and then you're like building more of an S curve.
Yeah.
So I don't know, it's a good question. I
Yeah.
think that's like something that we're always looking to explore and kind of dig into deeper. So I'm really excited to have you here, to talk about the work that you've been doing, what life is like in the industry right now, because for many of us, it's been a tougher time than what we might have been used to. Like, pre-pandemic work was pretty darn solid here in
Yeah.
Southern California, and I think globally and nationwide in terms of motion pictures, music videos, commercials. The pandemic was kind of a gut punch for a lot of us, and then there was a huge desire for more content coming out of the pandemic and in the pandemic. But how's the state of the industry? This is something I like to ask a lot of our guests. Like, what are you feeling as someone who's out there working on a regular basis? What is it like juggling living your life, but also trying to pay the bills and make sure that there's always the next project without being overstressed or burned out?
I mean, I think that's a juggle in itself.
For sure.
Is handling burnout. I think that's a big part of being a creative, is being able to handle, not being able to handle, but being able to bounce back from the burnout. 'Cause burnout's going to happen. It's just the nature of the beast. And if you're a creative, most likely you're a go, 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 you'll eventually hit a brick wall. And it's what you do at that point, whether you climb over it, or go under it. But you've got to get back up. I think that's the big thing for this industry, is bouncing back and rebounding. And, I didn't have the fortunate time that everyone else had here in LA. I moved to LA, and 3 years ago, I was driving back and forth from the Bay Area for.
Oh, so you're from the Bay Area?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And so for 3 years, I was driving back and forth, and it got to a point where I was getting booked like on a Monday and a Thursday, and I'm like, I can't Airbnb or hotel.
That's a lot of
a lot of fees. I was like, I just got to make the move out here. It's that time. And so I moved here during the COVID. And when I moved here, even though it was COVID, I still ended up tripling the revenue in business. So I don't know if that was a bad thing, even though everyone says it was bad. I felt like me making the move here helped my career, even though it was on a downturn. And even coming out of COVID, going into the strikes, I never experienced the strikes. I didn't know why the strikes were affecting us. So, a native industry person was like telling me why the strikes are affecting non-union people, and I didn't think about that.
Yeah, it kind of echoes through the industry, right?
Yeah.
So, definitely one of those things to consider. Big challenge. So I'm glad to know that you're from the Bay Area. I have a lot of love for the Bay. what would you say are some of the key differences between the LA scene in terms of filmmaking and the Bay Area scene in terms of different projects
Yeah.
and kind of like the attitude of the people?
Well, I think everyone, I mean, just like me, everyone comes to LA and they move here to, you know, chase their dreams and fulfill something. I think that's what happens to the Bay Area is people end up coming here because you just hit a ceiling at some point in the Bay Area. There's great production out there, but I mean, I don't think there's as much as there is out here. I don't think the opportunity to be in production is as abundant out there. And I just think that it's a lot more expected out here as a creative. You know, you can actually live that creative life, fulfill that creative career. So,
one of the things I like to think about, like you mentioned running into that brick wall, because I've definitely hit the brick wall before.
yeah,
And after coming out of where I was at, because I hadn't taken care of myself, my mental health, my physical health for years.
yeah,
And then coming out of that, what I'm realizing is that it's really, in a way, about cross training. So you have to kind of find space for yourself to build that in innately, to like take care of yourself a little bit extra.
yeah.
And that doesn't mean like cheat days from eating your diet. It means more like, you know, how do we get enough exercise if we know that we're gonna have, like, for instance, a 5 or 4 a.m. call time, and then we're gonna be working a 12, 14, 15, 16-hour day.
Yeah.
And then maybe we have a commute after that, bouncing into another commute. Or, you know, like I can imagine, you could tell me better, but I can imagine when you are doing work with a high-end robot arm that's transportable like this, it's a lot of work to not only move the heavy equipment,
Yeah.
you got to get in there early before everyone else, set it up, and then there's the teardown. And then because you're sort of independently contracted maybe to do robotic moves for certain things, you might be over here one day and then you might be on the other side of town or in another city altogether the next day, right?
Yeah,
So
I would say like this week is crazy with the robot. It feels like she's on a tour.
so you're working for her.
I'm working for her. Yeah, I'm literally working for her. But she has a better life now. You know, think about the life she came from.
Industrial.
Yeah, industrial life.
Sparks.
24 hours a day. You know, working, grinding, no breaks until she breaks down. Now she gets to rest and work. You know, very seldomly.
How that's that leads into a really great question. So I know that Rosie is a Sisu Cinema Robotics platform.
Yep.
Cyberdyne Systems, Wayland Yutani power loader model, right? But how did you first get into robotic camera movement? And then are you someone who's like really big into science fiction beyond this? Or like, I'd love to know more about like your relationship with robots, because
Okay.
just sort of how you see that world and
So I'll take you back to a little bit of backstory. I took robotics in high school.
no way.
Not because I wanted to take robotics, but because it was one of those creative classes that we could mess around in.
Wow.
But I knew that was something that I would semi-pay attention in. So I did robotics in high school. I also took entrepreneurship in high school. And then I ended up coming out of high school doing construction. And at the same time, I was learning to be a filmmaker at that time. So I was like dual career. And my love for gear and tools in the construction trade transferred into my love for tools and efficiencies in the film industry. And I think 2010, I worked at Tesla. So that was my first time seeing
Oh, wow.
like robots in action. And I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. Robots are the future.
And is that like up in Fremont?
Yeah, in Fremont,
Oh,
exactly.
wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
Worked at the Fremont plant. Actually, it was Palo Alto.
Oh,
So
okay.
their headquarters in 2010.
Wow.
So at that time, I don't think robots and filmmaking were like popular or mainstream.
It
at
was
that-
definitely one of those way more niche
Yeah,
things than
way
it
more
is
niche.
now. I mean, I'd say it's still fairly niche. Like, in a way, everybody is starting to get their hands on smaller scale robots with DJI gimbals, for instance, or Free Fly Systems gimbals. And so sort of what I'd consider sort of extensions of our human capability.
Yeah.
They're just another kind of tool,
Yeah,
right? But
tool.
it's kind of an exciting tool because we're exposed to science fiction things growing up a lot of the time. And, just like Rosie from the Jetsons, it's very futuristic. It feels both fun, inspiring to me, and sometimes scary, like if we think about the Weyland-Yutani power loader, and it's like this big mechanization that goes around your body, and you're maybe going to use it to protect yourself against the alien on a spaceship. Who knows? But I love it. I mean, I've always loved the idea of becoming more than human, and so I think that's
like having the exosuit and stuff like that.
I would love that. Sign me up. I don't want to get jacked into my brain. Like I'm not really into the
Matrix?
Neuralink thing. Like the meat connector to the brain, I'm good on. I think that the future of human-machine interface is probably way cleaner than that. Like quantum level interlocking or something like that. You don't need to just plug right into the neurons with some meat jacks. But anyway, I'm getting a little weird. But what can I say? It's a weird world. What do you think about that?
So science fiction, I'm more of like action, shoot 'em up type of movie guy. Like a movie I like is Den of Thieves.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
a great one. I just love that intro. I don't know, movies that have great intros are just, that hook me in. I like those ones. Saving Private Ryan, classic,
We were talking about Batman Begins the other day. That's pretty fun.
Batman Begins, is that which one was that? The new one?
I'm thinking about Bane, and maybe that's not the title. The one with Bane, where there's like Dark Knight Rises.
Dark Knight
Thank you,
Rises.
B.
Okay, Rises, yeah. I was gonna say
TG
Batman Begins was with.
Yeah, I'm out there.
Yeah.
TGFB. Thank goodness for B. Good looking out. We were just joking about Bane and the airplane sequence, or anyway. So yeah, that's awesome. And then I noticed your tattoo. Is that Johnny Knoxville, or
No,
is that my imagination?
that's my
Tell me.
brother.
Your brother?
Yeah.
Yeah. Tell us about your brother.
My brother was a inspiration to me. I kind of dedicated my whole right arm to him. Without Fear is kind of his liquor that I used to drink was Jameson, and on the cap was Cinematography, and then that meant Without Fear. Yeah, so that's kind of like my dedication to my brother. He passed away in a car accident in 2010.
Rest in peace.
Yeah, right before I got my Tesla job. Right before I feel like my life changed when he passed. So it kind of, put me in it's one of those things, in life, put you through, test you, and
Family is everything.
yeah,
My respects.
yeah.
Well, do we have any questions from the audience, folks?
We do. What was the last project you worked on with Rosie, if you could tell us anything about it? Or
Like the last project we were at Film Tools, that event.
That was fun.
Yeah, it was fun. We have a project coming up this week, actually on Thursday. That's a commercial shoot. Before that, the last project we had was going to be at Cinepax. We did the 2-year anniversary. It was kind of like an interactive Glambot virtual production Glambot. So guests were able to go into the virtual production, and then they were able to take home a video that same day.
I love that.
Yeah, it was
That's
pretty cool.
That's something we're going to be doing tomorrow, right
Check it
here at
out.
Atlas Lens Co. Wednesday, featuring Cassius King, the Cinema Junkies, and Rosie. So come on down. If you've never been to a Wednesday, it's something we do literally every Wednesday, but tomorrow is going to be special because we're going to have the workshop with Cassius, Rosie, and an experience where you can learn more about cinema robotic movement. And for those of you in the audience who, definitely maybe have not experienced working with a cinematic robot to do camera movement, do you mind running us through some of the basic principles? Like, for instance, some people might not even realize like what virtual production means. So
Yeah.
I could talk about that for a second. Basically, a virtually enhanced production is a production where in the past they might use something like a green screen to composite in a different background, or going back even further than that, you'd use something like front or rear projection to put in an image, or you might use something like matte painting. So they would paint these very elaborate backdrops, and I don't know about you, but I love the classic movies that you can see where there's like literally hand painted backdrops that seem so realistic. There's so much depth and intricate paintwork that goes into those backdrops, and it looks seamless when you watch the movies. So like a lot of the original Star Wars movies, which are some of my favorites, and going back to robotics, science fiction, and what got me into making movies personally, those movies inspired me to no end and still do. And you look at, like, for instance, inside the Death Star, there'd be like all these stormtroopers lined up with spacecraft, but then you can go and see like Ralph McQuarrie, who was one of the original key artists, and some of the people at ILM painting these very elaborate backdrops that they would then use and film as plates or just put in the backdrop.
Practically, right?
Practically,
Yeah, I think I've seen like stuff on Instagram where
It's
they show
amazing,
that,
right? Yeah.
They show you like what it looks like, and then the perspective, it'll move, and it's like, it's just a,
It's wild.
yeah.
But it's really cool that we have access to things like LED volumetric backdrops now, so you can dynamically create the backdrop with something like
Yeah.
Unreal Engine,
Yep.
which I imagine is something that you do a lot.
Yeah.
And so you can create the parallax movement related to the position of the camera arm. You can do all kinds of things. So
A lot
really,
of creativity when it comes to virtual production. I'll tell you one thing we just did. We helped out on a feature on some pickup shots, and they had to, I can't really talk too much about it, but they basically had to scale their talent. So their talent's like a small thing. So then they shot plates of the location, and then we're able to scale that location to size.
Wow.
So then now it looks like their talent is really small in the exact location. So I thought that was super cool. And again, just so many doors open when you are involving motion control, or you're involving virtual production, or any kind of new technology. Again, there's bugs, there's stuff that goes with it, but I think that comes with the experience and the repetitions that you have to put in just to be confident.
that's that cross training,
Yeah.
right? Like life teaches you all
Yeah.
kinds of things, and then if you're open to it, you can learn, keep growing, and keep moving. That's
Yeah,
great.
I love that cross training reference, because I like to consider my creative endurance. Like I do 14-hour days daily, just myself, with not even in the field or not working. It's just 14-hour days, and so when I get hired on set, it's like, oh, we have to do a 12. It's like, okay, not a big deal.
No problem.
Yeah,
right?
no problem.
Yeah, I got this.
I do 18-hour days. Like even yesterday when we were packing the robot and all that, we had a crane shoot, and then we came to the studio and packed it. And so I didn't get home till like 1 a.m.
Oh man.
Yeah.
And you were up pretty early today,
I was
I
up
think,
early.
right? Sheesh.
I'm a creative beast.
Question coming in from YouTube. How much for a day rental on a narrative feature for something like this?
That typically depends. There's a lot of factors that come into play for booking a robot, from power factor to transport to even scouting the location to make sure you can even get the robot in there. That was one thing I didn't think about when I was bringing the robot over here. I was like, I wonder if they have a payload entry or a dock, but the door worked fine. The cool thing about the robot is it fits through normal doorways, and so
it'll
everything-
fit through a human door.
It'll fit through. Sorry. Yeah, a human
Because
door.
we think about two different sized doors in film most of the time. There's a elephant door, and then what they used to call a man door, but I find that to be sexist, so I call it a human door.
I've never
But
heard
then
of human door.
that sounds like a humidor, which is like where you keep your cigars. So I don't know. We'll have to ask the Association of Smoking Cigars in Film. Shout out.
But yeah, just and then there's crew, labor, and then the rental costs. But yeah, human door got that.
That's what I'm here
Okay.
for, to mainly make people laugh, have a good time. So I love that you were able to bring this in and bring in your experience and, you know, your wealth of knowledge, and that people are going to be able to come down tomorrow to Atlas Wednesday and get some hands-on experience in case you've never worked with a motion control system before. It should be a really exciting and enlightening time.
I'm glad you guys are, you know, even allowed me to be out here, you know,
it's
give
our
me the
pleasure.
opportunity to share my story and talk about what I've done. Because even 15 years in the industry, I still feel like I haven't done enough, you know. So
I think that's one of the things that drives us. You know, I was thinking about myself, and my wife is always like, "You're doing too much. Like, you've done too much." Sometimes it upsets me.
yeah,
I'm jealous that you get to be doing all these things sometimes, and I don't blame her because, like, I always think, "Oh, this is just an obligation," but then I also think, "Yeah, what am I trying to prove to people?"
Yeah.
Like I think a lot
What
of
are
it
you
comes
chasing?
from what am I chasing? That's a great question. I mean, there's a lot of answers to that. I think one of the things, as I've matured more, I'm realizing it really requires me to cross-train in terms of giving my family enough time, and that's one of the big challenges in being in motion picture because, you know, 20 years ago I was in motion picture set lighting, so I'd be working with great gaffers, people like Eric Messerschmidt, who's now an Academy Award-winning ASC cinematographer. He was my gaffer, and I was a third electric, and we'd be working with people like Chris Rock, or on shows like Bones, and I'd see sound people and other people in other departments who've been working in the industry for 20 years at that time, and many of them were divorced and unhappy or had like rough family lives.
Yeah.
They weren't happy, and they loved the overtime. So we would do those 16, 18-hour days, and they'd be like, I love doing this because I need this overtime. And I was thinking to myself, I'm just a 20-something-year-old kid. I don't want to be working overtime. I'm not looking to start a family yet, but I'm imagining what my future would look like. And I thought it's really important to me to be a part of cinematography and to make images I believe in and help people tell stories. But
Yeah.
what is the cost at the end of the day? At what cost, right? So it's sort of a balance, and that ties us right back to what we started with, which is like, how do we evaluate the different parts of balance of being a creative, being technically adept, and making a mark with our technical abilities, improving ourselves, but also having that well-rounded home life that we can come back to. So I think that's really something we should all consider a little bit. And then, you know, there's sort of a toxic level of overtime that can happen. And I think, speaking to efficiency, like, there's no reason we can't all work together efficiently in motion picture to make days go faster, support each other, support our fellow people, and get the job done really quickly, but still get paid well.
Yeah.
I like to think of it as like, hey, imagine we could work 8 hours but get paid the same amount of money. That means we're making more money per hour.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Sign me up.
Yeah.
And then we get back that time. So if it is a 14-hour day, maybe we get those 5 or 6 extra hours to just like live, listen to music, you know, de-stress, and then go back and hit it again hard the next day.
Yeah, I try to like consider it as like a normal job. You know, Monday through Friday I go hard. Weekends I'm on D&D. I'll respond to texts and calls, but my phone stays on D&D for the most part. Allows me to focus. I don't get pinged from social media and a lot of distractions. But you know, for you, Dan, like, how have you dealt with like self-doubt, confidence?
That's a great question. I think over the years I've dealt with it differently. So
It's evolved.
yeah, I think definitely it's always evolving. It
Yeah.
has to evolve.
Yeah.
Because if we
Because your
don't-
goals are evolving, right?
goals are always changing. And what I always try to do is like, one, look at sort of case studies. So outside of myself, like what are case studies of things that other people have done that are successful or sometimes not successful? And then think about how that might relate to my journey. So, you know, a million other people have done, if not exactly what I'm trying to do, similar or analogous things. And I try to learn from those people's successes and failures. And then a big thing that I always try to remind myself is that failure, you know, some people like to say failure is not an option. And I believe in that in a different way. Failure is not the end. So a failure is just an opportunity to learn. And then the most successful people can take a failure and then take away as many learnings from that as possible.
Yeah.
So if something doesn't go right, you know, post-mortem analysis on that, or like trying to take away as many new experiences and learnings from that as possible, are a way of recovering and then actually enhancing your future possibility. So I try to remind myself of that. And, you know, it's good to have a healthy amount of self-doubt, but if we doubt ourselves too much, we might not even start. So I think, you know, maybe I've heard from others, I might be wired as a risk taker, or what some people call a stove toucher. So, you know, somebody says, don't touch that stove, it's hot.
What's hot mean?
Yeah, let me find out. Let's see, how hot is it?
Yeah.
How hot could it be?
Yeah, because is it hot enough to burn my fingers, or just hot?
Warm,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So I think that comes from the natural curiosity, and I think that's not always a bad thing. So I think, you know, well-rounded people are willing to take risks.
Yeah.
And I like calculated risk. So nothing ventured, nothing gained is something that always plays out for me. But hopefully we learn enough, like if we take certain risks, we know that those risks are...
Create results or something?
They can create results, or they could be unrecoverable. So
Yeah.
it's a sort of a balance, you know. There's taking measurements, I guess, if we think about it scientifically.
I think for me, like, it's, you know, that creative endurance I was talking about. It's like, yeah, I might go through a failure, or I might not succeed at something, but I still show up the next day, you know. I think that's super important. When in doubt, just show up still and do the work. Because in that work, you'll find, like, I don't know, you either get lost in the work, or I just, to me, when I started doubting myself, even 15 years in now, I still doubt myself even more. Like, the past year, I've been doubting my whole career. But I show up every day, and me showing up every day just kind of intuitively switches my mind into work mode, and not getting caught up in my thoughts. I think that's a big part too, is not to get caught up in your thoughts. Talk to people, talk to someone, get a mentor. So I think if you spend a lot of time in your own head, you're gonna talk your way out.
It could be a lonely place.
Yeah.
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 I like that a lot. I think it's really important to have people that you are accountable to. So I like your idea of showing up, you know, even if you know, hey, it may not be the best day ever, I'm not gonna give up. I'm still gonna give it what I have.
Yeah.
And just acknowledge, like, hey, I'm maybe a little down today, but we're gonna get through it. I think that's huge. So have someone who's accountable to you and someone you're accountable to, you know, and that's, at the end of the day, for me, that's my family, but that's also everyone here at the extended Atlas Lens Co. family.
There you go.
And the people who depend on and use our products to make beautiful images. So I'm really grateful to all of you.
Love it.
Here at Atlas, everyone out there who's using the lenses, owning the lenses, and people like you who are part of our greater cinematography community, coming and sharing your experience and, you know, sharing that vulnerability. Because definitely I think that's something that runs through my mind too, is like, you know, what is next? What do we do next?
Yeah.
How do we approach it? How do we support everyone the best way possible, even in the face of adversity?
Man.
So, that being said, like, you know, what are your thoughts on artificial intelligence and how it relates to image making, or, you know, then we think about sort of physical manifestations of beyond human, extra human extension. That's what I think of robots as, is like
Yeah.
extra human extension. But AI may or may not be that kind of extra human extension that we want for our minds.
I feel like it's gonna get there. Technology is just evolving. I feel like we're on the brink and we're on the horizon. Now, what do I feel about that? I'm not too worried. Someone's still got to operate. Someone's still got to write the prompt. For the most part, I feel like when AI evolves to a point where it doesn't need us, that's scary. It probably will get there still. But in terms of filmmaking in the industry, I consider it another tool. I use it all the time. And I think, as a creative, we all should use the tools we have necessary, or the tools that we have available. Those are going to be the best tools. And if it can help us be more creative or, express our vision more thoroughly, why not?
I see it in a lot of ways as an icebreaker. So if you're sort of stuck on something and you're like, what will be sort of a stepping stone to opening a different angle on something?
Yeah.
I find that can be sometimes a useful thing to leverage
Yeah.
in a way.
I mean, I feel like we use AI all the time, even when you call in for your bank and
Even if we don't know it, right?
even if you don't know it and you're calling to your bank and it tells you press 1 if you want to do this, press 2. That's all AI. It's not someone talking and telling you. I feel like we're slowly already in it already.
For sure.
Without knowing it.
Without a doubt,
Yeah.
that is absolutely true.
About like the creative endurance and what are the challenges of putting that to use on set, and especially with like such a strong machine? How do you stay careful, and when you're dealing with these long days, what are some challenges that you face?
So just to relay that so everyone
Yeah.
can hear the question, what are some of the challenges in terms of creative endurance, and especially in regards to safety with heavy equipment on set? Is that pretty well?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would treat it like working out in the gym. It's your creative muscle, so to speak. I would say that, properly train. Like, you're not going to go in and lift, 145 dumbbells if you're only used to doing 5 pounds. You know what I mean? So I would say, like, you have to build up that creative endurance to be able to operate safely. I mean, obviously you want to take your breaks, and the cool thing about specialty stuff is that we're only called for that specialty moment, so to speak. Yeah, it might take all day to set up. We're only there for like 3 or 4 shots or something like that. So I think having that endurance to get to that point of ready, and then training yourself to, also perform in the 5th hour or the 5th quarter. That's what I would say.
And for the people who may be less familiar with using a repeatable, programmable, and accurate machine such as Rosie, what are some of the key advantages or like reasons you might choose cinematic robotic motion control versus something like a Fisher or a Chapman Dolly?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like any other tool. It does require a little more setup than some tools, but I think it also it's versatile in the fact that you can use the robot for multiple tools. So you can use it as a dolly, you can use it as a crane, you can use it as a slider.
So compound movement is inherently part of the system.
Yeah.
Like to be able to do compound moves smoothly and repeatably, right?
And repeatedly, yeah. I think that's the big thing is repeatability, because then you can start doing multi-pass. We've cloned people, which actually Thursday's project, there's supposed to be a clone shot.
Oh, wow.
So, and I feel like that's super cool when you can incorporate motion and cloning, and just in general, like motion control. I love motion control because I feel like once you get it down, you can pick anywhere in the sequence where you want to go back to. And if you want to add more stuff, you can. And you can kind of composite your shot how you want it to be.
So it's like a portal to time.
Yeah, it's a
basically.
portal
You're
to time.
You're kind of a dimensional controller at that point, right? You
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah,
get really metaphysical with it if you want to.
yeah. If you want to go down that wormhole.
Nice.
When you're on set, how big is the team? Like how many people are?
How big is your team is the question being relayed from Justin and from online.
Yeah. So typically the team consists of like our operator, our technician, and then an assistant would come out for the bigger projects. And then I'll come out as a supervisor sometimes for like the really, really big projects. But it's typically like 3 to 4 people. And we typically recommend a prep day. So that allows us, so I can talk about what a prep day
Oh,
would
yeah,
consist of.
please.
Yeah,
Yeah.
prep day would consist of like pre-programming, mapping in lenses, mapping in your sense, or mapping in the camera. You want, like when we deal with robots and motion control, we execute by precision. We perform in a precision manner. So everything's got to be exact or close to exact. So depending where the sensor lines up, when you mount the camera on the arm, like that will change your tracking, so to speak. And because focus, depth, and tracking exponentially grows, you'll run into so many problems if that's not exact. Your measurements are off, or you skipped a step or something like that. You'll find out later. Like it'll bite you in the butt later. So.
Thank you. So jumping back, what would you say were some of the best parts about working with Tesla and maybe some of the big challenges? And you don't have to dig into it too deeply if you don't want to, but I've been curious lately because I only have internal combustion engine vehicles, and I'm considering an electric vehicle because I've got solar at my house. So
Yeah.
we have surplus electricity, and I'm like, if I could drive to work for free every
Yeah.
day without paying for gas, that might be nice.
Yeah, I mean, I drive a truck, and I think my gas is like $50 each day,
Wow.
there and back. Yeah.
Yo.
So EV would be nice, but I mean, working at Tesla, I mean, the culture, it's a hip company. It's a great company. If that's all you want to do for your day, because it's
Live
like
the vibe.
yeah, it's a work vibe.
Yeah.
It's like the creative industry. Like that's actually where I got my creative endurance built up from, was working at Tesla, because
Oh,
we did
cool.
12, 14-hour days like nothing, and it was construction, hard work. So, I mean, that definitely translated into creative endurance.
I like that you mentioned you were doing construction too, because I think that one of the things that working in a job like construction teaches you is like good communication
Yeah.
and collaboration, right?
Yeah.
Because we're trying to do a project.
Yeah.
We need to be able to talk with our fellows and communicate like, hey, we're going to do this, and then this is what's going to happen
Yeah.
next. So to be able to like plan, operate, and then there's a significant amount of heavy labor involved
Yeah.
in that too, just like in film.
I really relate a lot of production to construction. You're building a blueprint. I mean, you're building off of a blueprint. So, a treatment, script, or deck, storyboard, those are all blueprints in a sense. So, I definitely relate production to construction.
And then there's always the challenges of like the blueprint says this,
Yeah.
and then you meet reality, and
Yeah.
you're like, well, it can't be exactly what the paper says, but how do we get close and make it excel at
Yeah.
the same time? Like, we may not be able to meet the blueprint specification for what the script is telling us because it's raining and we can't control
Yeah.
that. It's a sunny day, so how do we do that? Well, we got lights, we got tarps, but
Yeah.
then that's a lot of work. So it's sort of a balance. It's a balancing act between
For
the
sure.
prescribed best result and then what we can actually execute on. Right?
What we actually see in real life. And I mean, I'm sure if anyone out there is in construction knows that when you tell an engineer this is not going to work, and they say it works in my CAD, and well, like they're like, well, there's a duct in the way. It's not going to work. It's like you gotta balance it out, and ultimately solve problems.
That's a fun thing to do.
Yeah.
I mean, being a problem solver, I think we can relate. That's
Yeah.
yeah.
Problem solver. You're a Lego artist. Putting Tetris artist, I should say. Putting your Pelican cases away in your trunk. Finding different ways to do things. And I think that, again, my construction side comes from having the right tools to do the right job. So yeah.
Sweet. Are there any questions you want to ask me about our lenses, about what we do here at Atlas, or and the same goes for anyone out there in the chat. If you have questions you want to ask, now's a great time to ask Cassius or myself about both our experience on set or with our respective brands and products and what we do. We're here for you.
There's a question about anamorphic lenses from Scott Brasher. What tips do you have for filming anamorphic when using a camera without a global shutter?
So the question coming in is, what tips do we have for filming with anamorphic lenses when your camera doesn't have global shutter? I love that question because most digital cinematography cameras and digital stills and motion cameras don't have global shutter. I mean, today we're looking at ourselves through a Red Raptor X XL, which we're blessed to have a global shutter. Of course, we're not firing any strobes or doing any super high motion. I'm just jiggling around in my chair here a little bit, but that's not going to show up. That's a great question because I think what that might be referring to is if you're doing high motion panning, especially with anamorphic, because your field of view is wider
Yeah.
by a factor of whatever your anamorphic ratio is. So with an Orion series lens, that's 2 times wider. With a Mercury series lens, that's 1.5 times wider. So if you're panning very fast, you might be inducing 2 times as much CMOS skew, or 1.5 times as much CMOS skew if your readout time on that sensor is not very fast. That's definitely something to be concerned about or cautious about or aware of, at least with robotic camera movement, because you can move fast, right?
Yeah.
You can probably move
Like 4 meters a second.
Yeah, that's fast. 4 meters a second, that's like 12 feet. Or 4 meters, about 12 feet a second. So that's fast. Like, watch out.
Yeah.
So the way that I like to handle it is knowing your panning speeds, and you can just sort of feel that out by filming a couple of tests or just watching it on a reliable monitor with reliable readout time. But anything
But what's the results of
having that?
Yeah.
So
I'm
having a
interested in-
non-global shutter, you can get skew sometimes. So some people call it micro jitter too if the frame breaks up.
Okay.
Like if,
That's
for
from the
instance,
vertical scan or something?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
from the readout time.
Okay.
So if the sensor is reading out the top to the bottom of the scan
Yeah.
in longer than 16 or 17 milliseconds, it can be apparent, is what I would say. 24 milliseconds would be any slower than that, and you're really going to be seeing it. So, I don't tend to find a lot of problems with that, even with older cameras. So looking at something like even a Red 1, which is at this point like a 17-year-old camera body.
Dinosaur.
I don't see a lot of skew, even with a 2 times anamorphic lens, but a lot of the time that could be mitigated because of the heaviness of the camera body, where you're counterbalanced and
Sure.
your pan speeds relative to the axis and the nodal point of the lens are pretty regulated. So I would just say pace your panning. Don't expect to be hand-holding an A7S Mark III without a rig with a 2 times anamorphic lens and running around with it. But that being said, the readout time on something like a Sony A7S III or an FX3 is actually pretty fast. And you can see that in movies like The Creator, where they use the Mercury 42 millimeter lens with the FX3 on a gimbal. So I'd say don't worry too much, just do test, and watch your pan speeds. And if you're using strobes in the scene, you're going to be better off with a global shutter. But if you don't have that, if you're going to fire a strobe like in a music video, just know that you might have to do some post-production work to frame blank to make the whole scene blown out by the strobe, if that's the look you're going for. But I would say it's not nearly as much of a worry as it might sound like if you're reading forums and people are saying, look out, something to be aware of, but I would say it's not panic-inducing. Even a 5D Mark II, which has pretty low readout speeds, people were doing movies like a movie called Rubber, which was famously directed by Mr. Oiseau, who's a French techno artist, and I'm a big fan. He makes these really wild, wacky movies. So he was using Lomo anamorphics in like 2010 when he made that movie Rubber, which is about a tire that goes on a killing spree, like a car tire. Pretty wild movie, shot on anamorphic. And there's some skew. There's a little bit of skew in the movie, but
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
Like shooting the lens sideways. I've seen that you guys did some tests.
Oh
Is that
yeah.
a vertical, or is that? Can you?
There's a couple different ways to approach it.
Yeah.
So to your point, one way that people do what I call vertical anamorphic would be keep your camera body in normal orientation, then turn the lens 90 degrees. And that's not possible with every anamorphic lens, but all the Atlas lenses have been designed in a way that you can intentionally orient the anamorphic axis whichever direction you want. And in normal orientation, the focal length numbers of the lens are on the side, big and readable, and you're going to get a wider horizontal field of view. What I like to do, and what we call Atlas scope, we have a technical paper on this that we put out. You turn the camera body 90 degrees so that your sensor becomes tall. So if you have something like a red Komodo, you end up with, instead of a 17:9, you end up with a 9:17 master recording area. So it's like shooting vertical with your phone. And then with the anamorphic D-squeeze, that 17:9 actually with a 2 times anamorphic lens like an Orion becomes 17:18. So nearly 1:1. So you just think about it unfolding the image to be a square. And with that square image, you can then do social media in square format. You can do a vertical extraction for phones or horizontal extraction. So if you put up frame guides, you can actually do what some people call an iron cross frame guide and have your composition squared up that you can do multiple deliveries from one recording.
I love that. I would love that, yeah.
Very useful for social media and overall multi-delivery aspect. I've done it for Facebook for different jobs.
Yeah, so
in
all
the
you
past.
people shooting social media with anamorphics.
I'd recommend it, yeah, especially in Atlas scope mode.
Yep.
DM us, and if you need a robot to move that around, hit up Rosie and Cassius. You're in good hands.
I'd love to talk to you about my experience with Atlas.
Yeah, I'd love to hear that. I mean, that's a great question. I was going to say, like, what's it been like using Atlas lenses in the past? And
Yeah, I mean, like realistically, like I've shot with Atlas lenses a lot, but that was like, you know, operating. It's not really getting to see, like, and I just DP'd a project recently. My good friend Andy from Cinematography has a set of Atlas Orions, and we rented those from him, and I was really able to get like that intimate feel of the lenses and play with them, and he let me keep them for a few extra days, which was super cool to like test more of the imagery out of it. And I personally love them. Like, I'm not gonna lie, like I really love the look of the Atlas lenses. Like, that's a genuine feedback from seeing how they look and the images to actually being able to go in and handle them and then be responsible for the image. It makes me definitely want to get a set. I'm
so happy.
I'm
to
not
hear
saying that just because I'm here. Like, I was telling Andy, like, oh, I want this set. I asked him if he wanted to trade lenses. He said no.
Rosie said no too.
But yeah, it was a great project. I DP'd. It was for upcoming director Geraldine. Geraldine was that? She's a great.
Oh, I've heard of her.
Yeah, she's a great director.
She's really cool.
Yeah, she's cool. She hired me to DP.
Is she from the Bay Area
She's
too?
from the Bay Area.
I picked up the Bay Area vibe when I met her. I was like, I am getting Bay vibes right now, but I didn't want to be like, are you from the Bay
I
Area?
don't want to assume.
Yeah, I don't want to assume.
Yeah, no, she hired me to DP her project. We decided on Atlas lenses, and that was my first DP project using Atlas lenses, and I was beyond like my expectations were
I'm so
succeeded.
happy to hear that.
Very, very good lenses. I definitely want an Orion set. The flares, like I have from my presentation, I have some of those frames that I pulled up.
We could do a little collab post later if you want to
Okay.
do like, you know, when the project comes out, we
Yeah.
could do a collab post with you and showcase
Yeah.
frames.
You guys check it out. It's going to be a Aubrey Fisher music video, directed by Geraldine, and DP by Cassius. And it's going to be an amazing project. Like the frames were gorgeous. The choreography was amazing. Like it's one of those projects that, to me, I'm very, very proud of to share.
I'm really happy to hear
So-
that. That's one of the things that, you know, to me means a lot is when people are able to do work that makes them feel proud
Yeah.
of what they've done, and just to be able to support that makes my day and makes my life better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's definitely given me the confidence. Because I swear, before the project, I was really just, again, one of my moments of just doubting myself, and I'm like, you know, I don't even know what I'm chasing. I don't know what I'm doing. And then, you know, this project I show up to and do the work, and it's like, oh man, I just got a boost of confidence of, I feel like I know what I'm doing, you know? Because I still feel like at times, I don't know how to do it. But then I go do the work, and it's like that second brain kicks in, that memory muscle kicks in. It's like, oh, yeah, you know what you're doing. So,
You know, I still get those feelings every time I have a job. I'm like, am I gonna do this right? Like,
yeah.
and then I just have to calm myself and say, you've done this so many
Yeah,
times. But I think,
yeah.
you know, there's something to be said for self-reflective awareness that we want to question.
Yeah.
If we were just so confident that we never questioned ourselves, we'd probably be fools.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to say, like, hey, am I dialed in? It's just a
Yeah.
good reminder. Like, it kind of sinks you into what you're doing.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Healthy self awareness is
Yeah.
better than self doubt.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, if we have any other questions out there, shoot them at us. Otherwise, plan on coming through Atlas Lens Co. Wednesday tomorrow, featuring Cassius King, the Cinema Junkies, Rosie the Robot. It's been a fantastic telecast Tuesday. I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you, Dan.
I
Appreciate
loved
it. It's been great.
getting to spend that time with you
Yeah.
and hearing about your journey and kind of your excitement and what you're up to.
Yeah.
So thank you, Atlas viewers, and anyone who's joined us today who is new to the telecast. We archive these so you can find them on YouTube under Atlas Lens Co. channel in the live section, and we also will be doing cut downs on Instagram. We're here every Tuesday, 11:30 Pacific Standard Time. We will be here every Wednesday at Wednesday, and I hope to see your smiling face right here, Glendale, California, Wednesday tomorrow with us. So let's have a great time. Have a great Tuesday, no matter where you are in the world, and we'll see you next time.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having us, and just want to give a quick shout out to Sisu. Been a great partner to work with in terms of robot motion control, which is what we have. We have a new battery box, so we can take the robot remotely, and we don't need to plug into industrial power. So, shout out Sisu and
Team Sisu,
and shout out Atlas. I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to share my story. So,
our pleasure.
Awesome.
Always love to have you. We'll see you next time. Take care.